Joining the Observer on the air live couldn't be easier. First, visit bit.ly/obguest. Once you click on that, you'll wind up on this screen. Then, you'll have to choose the webcam that you want to use. You can see there's a list of them here. And once you choose the right webcam, you'll then have to choose the microphone that you want to use. It's all very simple. Then type in your name where it says your name here. And once you have finished typing your name, click the join button. Then you'll be in the queue to be on the air. It's that easy. Hi again, everybody. It's Kevin Canessa coming to you from the newsroom of The Observer and TheObserver.com on this, the 30th day of January in the year 2024. Sure hope you're enjoying your Tuesday, no matter where you are in the country. And as we do each and every Tuesday, we join you so that we can bring you this week's news. And we have a lot to get to today. This is going to be a longer broadcast because I have an interview that I did this morning with Father Joe Mancini, who is the pastor of St. Stephen's in Kearney, to talk about the 4 chaplains, the Father Washington Mass, which is coming up this Sunday at noon at the noon Mass at St. Stephen's Church. We will get to that in a bit, and we'll get to all of the news of the day, and there's a few housekeeping items to cover. On the screen, you'll see we have the chat room up there for everybody to see. So we welcome in our dear friend Carmen de Jesus, Henry Atwell, and Manny Ventoso Jr., all 3 of the finest people you're ever going to see in one location at one time. So good afternoon to all 3 of you and to anybody else who may be out there watching right now. Before we get into all the news, the housekeeping items. I think all of you know that our cult is our mascot. Of course, he's Lisa and Johnny's dog, but he's also here with us a lot, and a lot of the times that we put ads in the paper with fillers and things of that nature, we have his picture associated with it. Well, Lisa entered a cult into a contest. It is the Modern Dog Magazine America's Favorite Dog Contest, and of course the winner wins $10,000. So can you help us, please? You'll see that the link where you can vote is up on the screen. It's americasfavepet.com/2024/cult45.1EBB. I won't go through that again, but you see it's up on the screen. And people who are allowed to vote can do so once a day. You have to sign in through Facebook by just clicking and authorizing it and then clicking on the vote tab. And at the end of the contest, the person who has the most votes wins $10,000. So could I ask you all to please vote for our culty so that we can get that contest and bring Lisa and Johnny back a nice $10,000 prize for winning that. And Lisa is with us. She's not in the office today. As you can see on the screen, she is in the car on the road right now, but she is still listening in. I hope, she said she's watching. I kind of hope she's not watching, but listening, because if she's watching, that means her eyes are probably not on the road, and we need her to get there safely. So when you get a chance, please vote for Cult at that link. It's on our Facebook page if you have not seen it and didn't get a chance to write it down. Now, Melanie Ryan sent me this, and Lisa also notified me of this, that on Schuyler Avenue, there's a water main break. This was posted to the town's website at a little bit before 1 o'clock today. It's on Schuyler between Laurel Avenue and Howell Place, and according to the town, residents in those areas will experience road closures and low water pressure while the line is being repaired. You can sort of see it's a little brownish there in that photo that was taken. That must have been earlier today. So if you are wise, you will remain out of that vicinity because the roads are closed. And I was wondering, when I was driving in this morning, I saw that Schuyler Avenue was closed at Midland, so maybe that might be the reason why. I don't know how long this has been going on, but it is certainly something you will want to avoid at all costs because the traffic is going to be pretty crazy if you have to get off there, maybe go to Elm Street and some of the other side streets that are over in that neck of the woods. Now, before we get to this week's news, and then also my interview with Father Joe Mancini to talk about the four chaplains, Father John Washington, who was a curate at St. Stephen's in the 1940s and the late 30s. This morning was the funeral for Joseph Zadroga, the retired North Arlington chief of police, and his funeral procession en route to Queen of Peace Church this morning passed by our office. Lisa tells me, because unfortunately it happened right while I was interviewing Father Joe, that it was about 10 minutes long. So you can imagine how many people must have been there and going to the Mass, and then, of course, at the funeral parlor over the last couple of days. There were viewings on Sunday and, of course, on Monday as well. But Lisa was quick enough to catch the very end of the last 2 minutes of the funeral procession that made its way along Kearney Avenue and then ultimately into Ridge Road in North Arlington. So I wanted to show you that right now, and you will of course notice the hearses in here, and there are some first responder vehicles as well. There were a lot of NYPD and Port Authority police officers who were here, but you will see this right now. So take a look at this. This was from earlier this morning. So there it is. That was the tail end of the procession for the funeral for Joseph Zadroga. When I started the video, I probably should have noted, Manny, that the audio is very, very light. Lisa was inside when she was filming that, so you can hear the motorcycles go by and some of the sirens, but that was all. And that's why it was so quiet and why it sounded like it was ducking. So I apologize. I should have said something about that right from the get-go. But that, again, was the funeral procession for the late Chief of Police in North Arlington, Joseph Zadroga, who died at an all-too-young age in such a tragic way. This week's newspaper. There was a lot going on this week. This was one of the busier weeks we've had in a long time. And a lot of good news came from it. Not all good news, but a lot of good news. The first one is that this gas-powered grid that there was talk about building in South Kearney has been completely scrapped by the state of New Jersey. This was something that people were fighting for vociferously over the last year or so. And look, we're in an era where people are trying to get away from the use of fossil fuels and things of that nature, and yet the plan was to build a gas-powered grid in South Kearney, and there were a lot of environmental activists who fought against this very, very loudly. And because they did, the state has decided to scrap the plan altogether. And this is probably good news for everybody in Kearney, that something like this is not going to happen. We constantly hearing about all these things that go on that the state has a connection to, and it kind of relates to our next story, which is one of our following stories, which is about, of course, the Essex Greenway, where it just seems like the state is constantly dumping on us, literally and figuratively. And there was also, you recall a couple of years ago, I haven't heard anything about it, about this waste station that there was talk about building in South Kearney as well, that would use human waste. That sort of kind of fizzled out as well, but this was good news that this plan was completely scrapped. They're going to use the money that was earmarked for something completely different. And I know that the people who are involved on the environmental side are certainly glad that this thing has gone away, and it turns out it'll be good, I think, for everybody, not just in South Kearney, but uplands as well. So that was certainly big news to come out during the course of the week. Now, this one, of course, last week there was a meeting in Roosevelt School in Kearney, and the state DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, was on hand. They had about 150 to 200 people who showed up for this public session for a lot of input on what will and won't go into the Essex-Hudson Greenway, whatever it's being called. And the commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection was present, Sean LaTourette, Mayor Carol Jean Doyle, most members of the town council, and some angry people in the audience, rightfully so, because look, this is not a matter of whether the Greenway is going to happen, because it is going to happen in some shape or form. When the state makes up its mind like this, they've already approved that it's going to happen. It's a matter of how it will be set up. And some of the concerns, rightfully, I think, were who's going to protect this. And I can start off by telling you that right from the get-go, this was not very well devised, I don't think, because they're going to put the first segment that's going to be built will be in Kearney and in Newark. However, the two sections will not connect because the bridge that crosses over Passaic Avenue was too cost prohibitive to put in the first leg of the project. But lo and behold, don't you know, there are plans to put a State Park Police substation on the Newark side. Well, Mayor Doyle and a few other people in the crowd said, well, what about us? Are you going to put a substation in Kearney? Of course, the DEP commissioner would not commit to that, although the mayor said very, very loudly and very, very clearly that it's non-negotiable, that if you're going to build this and you're going to do this, we want a police substation on the Kearney side of this project. And I think that's exactly what should be done, because when you think about this, this is going to be another added burden to the Kearney PD if this isn't done. You and I know that even if they put the police substation there, this is going to fall back on the Kearney Police Department regardless, because, look, they hired 7 new park rangers, and don't tell me that they're going to be able to completely cover this 9-mile stretch from Jersey City to Montclair. That's just ridiculous. It is going to fall back on the local police departments no matter what the state says. And if they tell you otherwise, they're full of crap, and you and I both know that. But the bottom line is the original plans call for a substation just in Newark, but not on the Kearney side. So that's something I think that has to be determined. And then there was a lot of discussion about, how do you get in, how do you get out? There was just so many different aspects of it. So I hope you'll read the story about this. It affects everybody, even if you don't live by this Greenway. And some questions were answered, some weren't. And I still think it's going to be a while before we see anything. The bottom line is the first leg will be in Kearney and Newark, but it will not be connected because they're not going to connect the Passaic River Bridge. It's just not cost effective at this point in time. But I think more questions probably remain than were answered at this meeting. But check it out for yourself. Take a look at this week's edition of The Observer and see what you think. Now, the final big story of the week is the Kearney Health Annex, which is being built on Belgrove Drive at the former site of the Kearney Police Department's substation. This has been in the works for over a year, and a representative from the engineering firm was in town to answer questions last week when the mayor and council got together last Monday. And this is going to be a beautiful building. It really is, because really what's over there now is just a trailer. And you can see it looks kind of similar in its own way to the McNichol Board of Health building on Kearney Avenue here, but it's going to be smaller scale, will be used for testing and for food distribution and other things, and to bring greater access to the people of the first and second wards and East Newark, who also get their health services from the town of Kearney. And it's a beautiful building. It's going to be very, very nice. And the good thing about it is that not one penny of taxpayer dollars from the local side will be used to pay for this. This is all being paid for by the federal government in a program that is being administered by the by the county of Hudson. So, when you can bring something beautiful in like this and not have to pay a penny for it, that's a great thing. And I think a cap tip has to go to Steve Marks for doing the research and getting this grant funded when all is said and done. And it's going to be a very green building. There's going to be backup solar power there, so if God forbid the power goes out, the refrigerators will stay on, so will the computers, and the ability to conduct business in inclement weather will continue on at this new health annex on Belgrove Drive. So check out that story on page number 1. Now, as I said at the beginning of today's program, earlier this morning, I had an opportunity to sit down with Father Joe Mancini. He, of course, is the pastor of St. Stephen's Church in Kearney. And coming up on Sunday at noon, it is the annual Four Chaplains / Father Washington Mass. There's no preferred way of calling it. Father Joe tells me it was always known as the Father Washington Mass, but over the years, relatives of the other chaplains who were on board had started coming to the Mass, so it sort of evolved its way into being called the Four Chaplains Mass. But Father John Washington was a curate at St. Stephen's in the late 1930s and then in the early 1940s, and the last Mass he preached was at St. Stephen's Church in Kearney before going off to the SS Dorchester in 1943. So the Mass is this weekend, and Father Joe sat down with me and gave me a little bit of a history lesson about the Four Chaplains and Father John Washington and the upcoming Mass. So without any further ado, here is my sit down with Father Joe Mancini from earlier today. Take a look. Joining me now is Father Joe Mancini, who has been the pastor of St. Stephen's for quite a long time. I know he's been at St. Stephen's for 23 years now, right? It's got to be, if not close.
Don't let that get out. But,
no, I won't tell anybody. We won't tell anybody. But Father Joe...
Pastor since 2011.
2011, and I think your first year was 2001, right? Right after ordination, you came right to St. Stephen's. Yeah. So he's pretty much been a lifer at St. Stephen's, and he joins us today to talk about the anniversary of the Four Chaplains and Father John Washington. Father Joe, thank you very much for doing this. I appreciate it very much.
You're welcome, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
Great. February 3rd, 1943, a day that in most people's lives would go by the wayside, but for the people of St. Stephen's, the people of Kearney, for the parishioners and the faithful of the Archdiocese of Newark, it's a very important day in the life of the church. So if you could bring us back to that day and the things that you know about what was going on the Dorchester on February 3rd, 1943.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. You're right. It's a day that a lot of people who know about Father Washington, who know about the chaplains, would remember. It was early that morning, just about 5 minutes before 1 a.m., when the Dorchester, which was a converted luxury liner, became a troop transport ship during the war efforts. It was in the waters of the North Atlantic, and the ship was on its way to Greenland, where they were going to be um, spending a couple of days before headed off to Europe. And the captain of the ship, Captain, I believe Danielson or Danielson, not quite sure how to pronounce the name.
Right.
He knew that the waters were troubled. There were German U-boats patrolling those areas. It was a pretty popular travel route for ships leaving the United States to head to Europe with reinforcements, with supplies, with backup. And so he was being very careful, very cautious. There were actually, I believe, two or three other escort ships, one of which was the Tampa, the other was the Escanaba. I don't remember exactly if there was a third or what its name was, but like I said, just about 5 minutes before 1 in the morning, a German U-boat spotted the Dorchester, identified it as a troop transport ship, and fired on it. And it was, for all intents and purposes, it was a perfect hit. Hit on the starboard side of the ship, but well below the waterline. And the ship, it was an older ship, so it didn't have a lot of the reinforcements that the newer ships at the time had. It began to fill with water and began to sink. The ship actually sank within 27 minutes,
Wow.
which was pretty quick. Um, and there were 902 people on board the ship. Now, when you think about it, we know cruise ships today can hold 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people in some cases. But the Dorchester, like I said, it was a converted luxury liner. It didn't have room for 900 people. So there were, from what I understand from some of the survivor reports, there were um, there were bunk beds in the cabins, and they were four high. There were four servicemen in a set of bunk beds, and very often there were two sets of bunk beds. You had 8 guys in a room that would have accommodated, a couple, an individual, or even a small family. So it
Wow.
was quarters were tight. But when the torpedo hit the ship, like I said, below the waterline, some were killed instantly. They were right in the line of fire. Those who weren't, um, got up to the deck in various stages of dress and undress. Guys were sleeping, so some of them were just in their pajamas and
Yeah.
their not prepared to enter the icy waters. Let's put it that way. And there, from what some of the reports say, although it's hard to really say this definitively, there was a breakdown in the um, in the administrative end of the ship, and but it was panic and chaos. You can imagine,
Sure. Sure.
you know. So the four chaplains began to organize the men getting into the lifeboats, which of course there weren't enough, but also to hand out the life jackets, and there weren't enough of those either. But the four chaplains made a conscious decision to take off their life jackets and give them to four other soldiers so that they would have a chance to escape. And what the survivor accounts relay almost to a man is that as the ship was sinking into the water, the four chaplains could be seen on deck with their arms linked together,
Wow.
uh, praying for those who had died, praying for the survivors. And the last anyone saw of the four chaplains, they went down with the ship.
Wow. They knew at that moment when they took off those life rafts that they were giving their lives at that moment, didn't they? I mean, there
Yeah,
was probably
they
no
did.
way that anything other than complete doom was what would follow, right? I mean,
Yeah,
or is there any way to know that really? But they must have known, right?
they must have, what I think was perhaps more. I don't know the right word. I don't know if it's more amazing, more special. You know, these were four men of different faiths, different religious practices. They didn't huddle together and say, "Hey, should we do this?"
Hmm.
It wasn't a group effort to say, "All right, let's give our life jackets up." At the moment, maybe before they left, they said, if we're ever in this position, what do we do?
Right.
But I'd have to think not. You're not thinking that we're going to go down with the ship. But each one to a man knew that this is what they had to do, and it wasn't a group decision, but each one did it, and without hesitation, it seems.
Yeah. Truly remarkable.
Hmm.
If you're just joining us, Father Joe Mancini is with us. Father Joe is the pastor of St. Stephen's, and coming up on February 4th is the annual Four Chaplains Father Washington Mass. Um, what do we know about Father John Washington? Is there much known about his life before he gave his life with the other three chaplains, or was his earlier years not as well known by people who knew him?
There is quite a bit that we know about him. He was born in Newark, so a native of Newark, baptized at St. Rose of Lima Parish, down in the Roseville section. And from what we can gather, he had a pretty normal life. He was one of several children born to his parents. Um, I don't know what order he was. I'm not sure where he fell in the order of children.
Right.
He had, I believe, three brothers, another of which lost his life in the war as well. Um, and he was an altar boy at St. Rose. One thing we know, when he was about 12 years old, he was involved in an accident. He was playing baseball, and he got hit. He got struck by a batted ball in the face near the
Oof.
eye, actually,
Okay.
and it was thought that he was going to lose his sight, and his mother prayed that wouldn't happen. And although he didn't have perfect eyesight, he had to wear glasses for the rest of his life. He, it wasn't as bad as initially thought. But it was also in that moment that he decided he wanted to become a priest.
Wow.
He wanted to give his life to God, and so he went to the seminary for the Archdiocese of Newark, which at the time was in Darlington, up in the Mawa area, and he was ordained in 1935 at St. Patrick's Pro Cathedral in Newark. Sacred Heart Cathedral wasn't finished at the time; it was in the stages of being built.
Wow.
So St. Patrick's was the cathedral of the archdiocese. His first assignment was, I believe, to a parish in Orange, Saint Venantius, which is no longer a standalone parish. It's combined with Saint Andrew Kim. And then his second assignment, I believe, was Saint Genevieve's and Elizabeth. And then he came here in 1937 to St. Stephen's. And when I arrived here in 2001, there were still quite a few parishioners who remembered Father Washington. Um, some of our listeners or viewers today might remember Paul Shalvoy from St. Stephen's, Josephine Triano. A lot of people know Joe. Irma Long. She was the wife of Dr. Long.
Right.
um, Monsignor Ed Sullivan, who was a native to St. Stephen's and
Mm-hmm.
himself went on to become a priest,
Yeah.
along with Monsignor Bill Daly, um, another native of St. Stephen's. They knew Father Washington. And so the folks that knew Father Washington, yeah, they were kids at
Yeah.
that time. They remember a priest who kind of was unconventional for priests.
Really?
Yeah, they said that he wasn't averse to cracking jokes.
Okay.
You know, he would go over to someone's house, he'd take the collar off. And that wasn't always the norm for priests at the time.
No. No.
You know, but one of the things they remember about him is that he created what today we would refer to as youth groups or CYO, although it wasn't called that at the time. But he integrated the youth group. There was integrated in the sense that it was the Catholic school students, the St. Stephen's school students, and the public school students. Who were referred to as publics at the time.
Wow.
And but he would, and they kind of avoided each other. Everyone had their
Yeah.
own street, and but he brought the kids together. He would open the dances or the events, not just to the parish children, but to others in the town, and others in the area. He was really a forward thinker in a sense. You
Sure.
know, we have a picture in our archives when the current St. Stephen's Church was being built on the corner of Kearney and Laurel. There was a procession from the old church, which is on the corner of Midland and Chestnut. What's the school,
Hmm.
now the charter school. That was one of the original churches for us. There was a procession from that location at the school up to the current site, which was a building site, for the laying of the cornerstone. That was in 1937, and Father Washington is seen leading that procession.
Wow.
So that's what connection we have there. But he was well loved. He was well loved. The Monsignor Murphy, Father George Murphy, was the pastor at the time. Himself, a veteran of the Navy. You know, and from what we understand about Father Washington, when when the attack on Pearl Harbor happened, December 7th, 1941, he was returning back to the rectory. He had gone out with his mom for dinner, and he heard the report of the attack. He decided at that point to enter into military service.
Wow.
So it seems like it wasn't a long process of discernment for him. He heard about the attack, and that's what he wanted to do. you know. And there's a funny story that's actually told about it. I don't know how true it is, but sometimes there's always truth in legend.
Yeah, of course.
But, but because he wore glasses, he wanted to join the Navy. But because he wore glasses, he failed the vision test.
Oh no. Okay.
So he went back to Father Murphy, and sort of despondent. He said, "What do I do? I really want to do this." And Father Murphy said to him, Father Murphy was a Navy man. Father Murphy said, "Go to the Army, and when they tell you to cover your eyes, you're going to do you're going to do the test. When they tell you to cover the other eye, just cover the bad eye twice." That's what he did apparently, and that's again, I can't prove it, but that story's been passed down, and shows the humanity sometimes, right?
Right.
But
Uh.
one thing that we often talk about, and this was brought to my attention a couple of years ago
Right.
by Mark Auerbach, who was a cousin of Rabbi Good, and Mark he was the city historian for Passaic. He's been coming to the mass for a number of years, bringing a lot of memorabilia that he's collected about the four chaplains. And Mark had something that, as I've thought about it, it's become very profound for me. There are four places in the United States, four houses of worship, and only four that can claim to be the last pulpit of the four chaplains.
Mm.
And St. Stephen's is that place for Father Washington. The last place he ever said Mass, the last place he ever preached. And for me as a priest, that kind of gives me chills when I think about it. Because I'm not called to military service, but I try to do my best as a priest, and I can emulate someone like Father Washington. But that's what we know about him. It's he would seem to be a real genuine guy, a real down to earth guy, someone who wasn't averse to going against the system sometimes. But
Wow.
um, but
Well,
yeah, really, I think an inspiration for a lot of people in a
well,
lot of
you
ways.
you say that you weren't called to military service, but yet in your own way you have had such a great connection to the military since
Hmm.
you came to St. Stephen's in 2001. I mean, this has always been part of your assignment, right? I mean, you basically were doing this right from the beginning. Maybe
Right.
2002 would probably have been your first Father Washington Mass. So in a way, you
Yeah.
really do have such a connection to the military and to its people. And I think that speaks volumes about you too, though. So I think it's a fair assessment to say that you really do have a very, very strong willed connection to the military, and it has stuck with you all these years. That must not be easy to do.
That I credit to my family. My dad was in the New Jersey Army National Guard for over 40 years. My grandfather, who uh, my grandfather and I shared a birthday, July 20th, and it was the two of us always having that connection until he passed away just a few years ago.
Yeah.
But my grandfather was a cook um, in the military. And funny story though, when I received my assignment to St. Stephen's, I didn't know where St. Stephen's was. I knew Kearney.
Yeah.
You know, in my time as a youth minister in Elizabeth, we had been coming to the youth center on Belgrove Drive at Boys Town. But that's kind of that was I didn't know that there existed more beyond 499 Belgrove of
Right.
Kearney. So when I got the assignment, I Monsignor Desmond, who many people remember, he gave me a tour, and I was really impressed. You know, I remember I said to myself, "There's a lot of stairs in this place,
Yeah.
so I'll get my cardio and aerobics in." That didn't work too well. So I was leaving St. Stephen's, having seen it for the first time, driving back home, and of course I told my mom and dad. I called my mom and dad to let them know of my assignment, and my mother said to me, "You better call your grandfather." I said, "Okay." I said, "Why?" She goes, "He's familiar with St. Stephen's." I said, "Really?" So I called my grandfather, and my grandfather had been coming to the Father Washington Mass
No kidding.
for years, and I never knew it, And so when I saw it for the first time, like you said in 2002, I was really impressed, and so there was always that connection in the family. I just never knew it. And but even beyond, so my father, my grandfather, my godfather was in the military. My uncles have been in the military. So there's always been a military um, presence. My dad, when he was in the National Guard, um, when he retired, he was down in Lawrenceville. But prior to that, he was in the armory on Roseville Avenue
Wow.
in the Roseville section, which would be close to St. Rose of Lima. You know, so it's funny how as we get older, we see how some of these connections are made, and whether they're loose connections or strong connections, that they are connected. And so I really believe we're connected a lot to our past.
Oh yeah.
And so, my approach to the Father Washington Mass and honoring not just Father Washington and the other chaplains, but anyone who's given themselves to military service, that's really important for me. You know, we see, Kevin, and anyone who's been to the Mass knows, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, there was a lot of veterans who were here,
Yeah.
and they were proud to come, and they would be in their uniforms. I was always impressed when some of the tin can sailors would come. They were in their 80s and 90s, and the uniforms still fit. I've gone through like 4 or 5 sets of clerical shirts in 20 years, and these guys are 40 years removed, and everything still fits.
Right.
But they were proud. They were proud to be here, and they're part of the greatest generation. And when World War II ended, neither you nor I was around at that point, but there were great celebrations when the soldiers came home. You know, but then we fast forward to the time, after Vietnam.
Mm.
When Vietnam ended, it was a totally different attitude. No one wanted the country to be there. No one wanted our servicemen to be there. And when the servicemen came home, they weren't welcomed with open arms by an adoring country.
Wow.
Many times they were met with protests.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think it's important that we recognize the sacrifice that men and women who defend our liberty, who protect our freedom, we have to honor that sacrifice that they make. You know, and so that's kind of been the underlying motivation for me to really keep this memory alive. We hold up the four chaplains as men par excellence of what that sacrifice entails. In our stained glass window of Father Washington, there's a quote from the Gospel of Saint John: "Greater love has no man than to lay down his life for his friends." And we see that no matter our faith, no matter our religious practice, sacrifice is an important part of what we do. It has to be. It has to be. For Christians, we look at Christ, who gave his life for us, didn't ask anything in return. you know, and the four chaplains didn't either. You know, they didn't say, "Well, I'll give you my life jacket if you do this." No, there's no record of that. There's no recounting of that. So I think they are good examples for us and really role models for us of how to love. And love without sacrifice isn't love.
Exactly.
It's an infatuation.
Yep.
You
That's
know?
it.
Love love hurts sometimes, and sacrifice hurts sometimes. You know, but we know that through that we do become better people for it. And so remembering the four chaplains in this way, and that's a little bit about my history with the military. I was in Boy Scouts, of course, and there
Sure.
was always that sense of military, you know. But yeah, I just think it's important that we honor those, and even those who are serving now. You know, we have here at St. Stephen's a book of remembrance for those in the military and those in civil service. You know, policemen, firemen, um, and we keep it in the sanctuary of the four chaplains to remember.
Are there a lot of people who are still overseas now serving from the parish?
I'm sorry, you cut off there. There are a
I'm
lot of
sorry.
people.
A lot of
That's
people
okay.
from the parish who are still in the military who are serving overseas. Is it a good number of people that you know?
Um, I don't know an exact number. I think a lot of them are, you know, some of them are in the reserves. Some of them are in the academy. Michael Fernandez, who we know from Carney,
Sure.
he's in his first year. Um, Mark Isabella, I know is has been deployed right now.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, and those are got people that we remember. Some that are not. Again, I don't know specifics, but some that are in active service. Some are overseas. You know, to be honest, we don't have a lot of people in the book just yet. So if there's anyone, I'll put a little plug here. If there's anyone
Good.
who would like us to pray for and remember a loved one in the military service, in civil service, you can email their information to us. You know, their name, their branch, their rank, and also we'd like a picture. We have it's like a two-page spread. There's a an 8 by 10 photo, and then the information on the facing page. So it's something that we do as a parish and praying for those in military service.
What's the email address they should send the items to?
The Church of Saint Stephen at gmail.com, and the word saint is spelled out.
Saint. Okay. If you're just joining us, Father Joe Mancini, the pastor of St. Stephen's Church, is with us. And coming up on February 4th is the annual Four Chaplains Father Washington Mass. You and I had a little discussion about this on email, but it's kind of evolved into the Four Chaplains. Is there a right way, improper way to call this liturgy, or to call what is celebrated on the first Sunday of February, or is there not a necessarily a big deal about that?
In the past, it used to be the Father Washington Mass. Um, and I think at the time, rightfully so, because it was, you know, Father Washington was assigned here to St. Stephen's.
Right.
This was his last assignment before he left for chaplain school and then before the incident on the Dorchester. Over time, we've kind of began to include the other chaplains, and part of that is because we've extended the invitation to the relatives of the four chaplains that we knew. I mentioned Mark Auerbach has joined us in the past, and we've also been honored to have Rabbi Good's son-in-law, Paul Freed, join us. I met Paul a couple of years ago, probably 14, 15 years ago now, down in Washington, D.C. Nancy Waller and I were invited to the floor of the House of Representatives. They were doing their four chaplains remembrance.
Wow.
And so we went down, and there was a reception beforehand in one of the senator's offices. And we had the privilege, really, to meet Paul. And he joined us the following year for the Mass. And he's been a pretty steady guest. So it's always good to see Paul
Sure.
when he comes and to see Mark. You know, we don't really have contact information for the two Protestant ministers, Reverend Fox and Reverend Poling. Um, so it's, you know, we kind of just, and even Father Washington's family, you know, his niece was with us for a number of years. She's passed away since.
Yeah.
So now we're into to other generations. cousins, nieces, and nephews, some of whom initially didn't even know about their famous relative.
Wow.
So to have them here was always a great privilege, and really to share that story. But so we've kind of begun to talk about the mass as the way that I'll do it officially is the mass in honor of Father John Washington and the chaplains of the Dorchester.
Right.
You know, but it's just a way to include them. You know, because I look at it this way. Father Washington didn't act alone. The other men were instrumental in what happened. And I think to isolate Father Washington and ignore the other three is a terrible disservice to their
Right.
memory. Yeah, they're not Catholic, but that doesn't matter. We offer mass for anyone, Catholic,
Right.
non-Catholic, deceased. And people have often said to me, "Are you gonna? Do you think they'll be saints?" I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how the church would look at including non-Catholics in that. And it wouldn't be fair to say Father John Washington and companions, as we sometimes because I think the story is about the four chaplains. It's
Right.
not. It's not Father John Washington and the others. It's not like that Gilligan's Island theme song. That and the rest.
And the rest. Yep.
But all of them. I look at them as one unit together. One body acting together to do what they did. Because I think the four chaplains, they didn't know each other until they got to chaplain school. And they really formed a great bond and a great friendship at a time in the Catholic Church when interfaith and ecumenical relations was not what it is today. You know, and I think looking back at what we know about Father Washington bringing together the Catholic school and the public school children, you know, I think he may have been the catalyst in
Yeah.
making this work between a Catholic priest, a Jewish rabbi, and two Protestant ministers. And they had a great relationship. Some of the men on the ship, some of the survivors in different books and movies and whatever, said that on Fridays the the Jewish faith that have their services on Fridays,
Right.
and the men on the ship, again, space was limited, it was tight, it was cramped. So guys would be playing cards in the common room where the service was going to take place, and Father Washington would come down and tell the guys to leave so that the Jewish men could have their service. You know. And then the same thing would happen on Sundays. Rabbi Good would chase the guys out so that Father Washington could say mass. But there was a great camaraderie between the four men. Um, Good sense of humor, but a healthy respect for each other and for each other's practice of their faith and religion.
Remarkable.
So I think it's important to remember all of them, you know, together.
We're about 30 minutes in, and I can't thank you enough for doing this, Father Joe. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask you two final questions. One is about Nancy Waller. You mentioned her, and I know she's had a big part in planning this every year because I always hear from her every January. So tell me a little bit about what Nancy does to support you in the whole experience of the Four Chaplains, Father Washington. And then tell us a little bit about this year's liturgy, how it might be a little bit different than others, or if it's going to be pretty much the same, and who the celebrant is.
So, well, Nancy's going to come after us because she doesn't like the attention.
Ah, I bet. I know, but that was part of the reason why I had to ask the question.
I understand. I
Yeah,
understand. But
yeah,
and Nancy, we're saying this because we respect what you do and we're very grateful for what you do.
that's right.
But Nancy will reach out to the different veterans groups that we're aware of, folks that have come in the past, maybe new ones who contact us during the year to do the initial invite. She usually does that in the fall, save the date type of thing,
Yeah,
and she'll be the coordinator for those groups that come. So when I give my thank yous at the end of the mass, the groups that I'm mentioning are because of who the list that Nancy has compiled.
sure.
She and her husband Jim will come on Saturday, the day before the mass, to set up the various memorabilia that we have, the various displays and exhibits down in Hedges Hall, our church basement. We do have a reception for the veterans and our guests, Knights of Columbus, the Scouts, those who are coming to join us. We have that reception prior to the mass. on the day on Sunday, and that those displays are all set up in Hedges Hall, and then Nancy and Jim will go and obtain the different things we need, the refreshments and whatnot. But they also don't act alone, and I know Nancy would want me to say this, that there are
Sure.
others who help her, named and unnamed, people who just want to help and to be there, you know. So it's really it's a lot off my mind, and I do appreciate all the work she does, and it's something that she enjoys doing, you know. But the mass this year, like you said, Kevin, is February 4th at 12 noon, and we're honored to have Bishop Elias Lorenzo, who is an auxiliary bishop of the Archdiocese of Newark. He's the regional vicar for Union County. He's going to be coming to celebrate the mass. This is his first visit to St. Stephen's. Um, I think ever. So he's looking
Wow.
forward to it. And I about 2 weeks ago, I sent him just some notes on the four chaplains to consider for his homily. And he wrote back to me thanking me. And he said that his dad was a part of the Greatest Generation in World War II. So that's going to take on some significance for him. Our scouts are really instrumental. We often say that our scouts have adopted the four chaplains as their spiritual patrons here at St. Stephen's. The boys wear neckerchiefs that have it's a purple neckerchief, and on the back is the patch that they created for the four chaplains.
Wow.
Their supply trailer for camping trips has a large decal of that neckerchief emblazoned on it. So they've really taken a great interest in the four chaplains, and as I said, the Knights of Columbus. So it's really a special time for us. This is the 81st year, the 81st anniversary of the Dorchester and the four chaplains sacrifice. So I'm hoping we can keep it going. The more we get away from that time in history, the more we may tend to forget what happened. And my goal, my mission is to make sure we don't forget, to keep the story going, because these are the real heroes we need today.
So true, so true. And what you said resonates because we're starting to see it already with 9/11. As we're getting further away, the celebrations have been much less than they have been over the years. But I think the one good thing that everybody at St. Stephen's knows that is with you in their corners, this isn't going to change anytime soon. And on a personal note, and as a representative of this newspaper, I can't thank you enough for spending part of your day with us today and sharing this incredible story about Father Washington, the four chaplains, Father Joe. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity, Kevin.
Okay, Father Joe. That's Father Joe Mancini, everybody. So there he is, Father Joe Mancini, pastor of St. Stephen's Church, with an incredible history lesson about Father John Washington, the four chaplains. And I'll tell you what, there were so many things that I learned there, but the one that I loved the most was when he was talking about how Father Washington wanted to go into the Navy and he was disqualified from his eyesight, and then he just covered the same eye twice. The one that was the bad eye, when he got hit in the head and the face with the baseball in order to get into the Army. So great stuff from Father Joe. Thank you, Father Joe, for spending a half hour with us today. I really appreciated it, and I certainly hope that all of the viewers out there who are watching today, whether live or on the podcast, enjoyed this as well. And don't forget, again, the Father Washington Four Chaplains Mass comes up on Sunday, this Sunday, at noon at St. Stephen's Church. Be there a little bit early because it's usually pretty crowded and you're going to want to find a decent seat. That'll do it for this week's edition of The Observer Live. Again, thanks to Father Joe and to everybody who joined us today. We will be back 1 week from today with more news and things that are going on. And, of course, if anything breaks during the course of the week, we will join you then. From the newsroom of The Observer and TheObserver.com, Kevin Canessa signing off for now, and we hope to see you back here again very, very soon. Take care, everybody. Manny, thank you very much. I saw you right there at the end. Bye-bye, everybody.